in years, but more our own evolution. The evolution we see all around us, the evolution of technology, the evolution of ideas. It's just expanding exponentially. I read recently in the Telegraph that in the past 30 years we now take in 5 times the amount of information that we used to take in then. 5 times the amount of information needs to come in, be processed, and something vaguely coherent come out of our mouths. In that same 30-year period, we produced the same amount of information in the world that we did 5,000 years before that. So again, this is increasing exponentially. Influx of information, and it's getting tough to deal with it all. We see burnout in the workplace, we see stress, we see overload, as people actually really struggle to actually comprehend the complexity of the world we're living in. So can we actually learn to deal with this in a different way, so we can actually think in new ways and actually be able to handle this amount of information? One good place that I like to look is actually how our computers are actually doing this. If we think back to the 90s, Windows 95, really basic operating system, pretty much could do basic word processing, write a few emails, but that's all we needed it for at the time. Now, we've got operating systems like Windows 8, which can handle so much more information and process so many more things at the same time. So in our computers, we've been upgrading the operating system, and then they can handle this influx of information. But what about us? Can we actually upgrade our own operating system? Can I go from Chris 7 to Chris 8? Good concept. Waiting for that day, that'll be great. I've looked around at eBay, I can't see any sort of personal upgrades there. My doctor looked at me kind of strangely when I asked him for an upgrade. But can we actually do this? Can we actually upgrade the way we think to actually handle this influx of information? So one of the many sort of systems that I study is a system called spiral dynamics, which actually looks at this very thing. How can we look back over time and see if we've upgraded ourselves in the past as a way to see if this is possible? And spiral dynamics at the moment is championed by a guy called Alder, who's a management consultant. And for the past 30 years he's been doing just that. He's been studying people over time and seeing if they're actually upgrading the way they think. And he believes, yes, this is possible. And what he sees is that it's actually based on our values. That if our values change, we change the way we think, we change the way we act, we change the way we interact with each other, and a lot changes. And that makes sense. And again, we can look back in history and we can see in the 60s, a small group of people started to stand up and say, I believe in equality, I believe in freedom. At the time, these were radical things. People didn't know much about these words even. But now we can walk into any business, any HR department and start using the word equality, and everybody knows what you mean by that word now. It's part of our cultural value, because we have upgraded our value structure since the 60s. And that helped us shift into where we are as a culture at the moment. Look back further, we can see there was another big shift with the Industrial Revolution, the Western Enlightenment. We started then focusing on success, on building up our businesses. And that was another big shift in the way we thought and what we valued. So really, if you keep looking back, you can see more of these big shifts that have happened where people, small groups of people have got together and started thinking in new ways, having new values, and it's affected the whole culture. So why wouldn't that happen again? Why is that not possible again and again and again? I really truly believe that there hasn't been 13.7 billion years of evolution for us just to sit around on Saturday night and watch X Factor. No offence to X Factor. But there's got to be more. There's got to be higher ways of thinking, higher ways of interacting with each other, and higher sets of values that can actually drive a new society. So if this is possible, how does it actually happen? Because I'm sure most of you here would agree. Let's do it, that's great. But how does it work? How can we actually upgrade ourselves? And again, looking back to the computer analogy, that's a good way to see how this could work. So the Microsoft developers, if they're looking at designing a new Windows, they're going to start by looking at the current one. What are the limitations of the current one? What is it not doing that it needs to do? And then looking at the environment. What does it need to do? What is the environment calling for it to be able to do? And I think the same is happening in us. I think we're intuiting it. That more and more people are seeking out coaching, whether it's personal or professional, so they can actually start to almost take an objective view of themselves and think what's working and what's not working. What needs to be upgraded within me? What small parts of my being need to be upgraded? So I think this is already happening, but it definitely could be increased. And that happens from us just taking that little bit of a step back and just taking a bit more of an objective view of where we're at personally, where our businesses are at, just so we can start to think in a new way. I think that's really the first step. And Einstein's famous quote that we can't solve the problems at the current level with the current level of thinking, that really points to that. That we can't just keep thinking in the same way, keep the same values and expecting things to change. So we really have two options. We really can just keep trying to do things the same way, or we can actually take that step back. Start objectifying ourselves, our culture, our values in a slightly different way. And it might mean we have to be a bit more honest, maybe a bit more vulnerable, a bit more open about where we are struggling, instead of just trying to push through the same old way. And I think if we can do that, then we really can, as a culture, actually make that shift to a new way of thinking, where there'll be less burnout, less stress, and where we'll actually be able to handle the complexity of the world and really create a new culture for ourselves. Thank you very much.